Well, praise the Lord, everybody. As Brother Billy Lewis used to say years ago, 30 minutes is long enough for a good preacher and it's way too long for a bad one. He always said it jokingly, but he said it frequently, so I think he meant it. 2 Corinthians chapter number 12 is where I want to go for a little while this evening. And I want to try to just settle down for a few minutes. And I'm not planning on holding you long, but I do feel that God has given me some things. And Ephesians chapter 4, the Apostle Paul talks about the fivefold ministry. And one of those giftings in the fivefold ministry is teaching. And so I want to just settle down tonight if I can and just share some things with you from the Word of the Lord. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. While you guys are turning there, I'll share this story with you. I don't know if I've told this story here before or not. I was trying to remember this afternoon on my way home from work. I don't keep track of stories I tell or where I told them, so I might have already told it here. I don't know. If I have, just bear with me, okay? So, if I recall correctly, I think I'm correct. Dad may remember this. I don't know. I was around 7 or 8 years old. I think it was a Saturday morning, and he was about to go to the feed store. He always went to Ward's feed store. You guys remember Ward's feed store over where? Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, over there on the old 78 highway, Maywood area. Yeah, and he buy feed over there. Dad would always buy a little small pig every year, and of course these weren't pets. They were being raised for food. And so then he'd also buy a little calf and do the same thing. And we were going to go to Ward's Feed and pick up some feed. And I was getting in the truck and I slipped and I fell. Dad always had an old Ford pickup. And I slipped and fell on my knee, and I started crying, and Dad acted like he was sort of surprised that it hurt that bad. In fact, I think he said something about that. It shouldn't hurt that bad. Here, pull your pants leg up, let me see. Pull the pants leg up, and right above my knee, right around my knee area was extremely swollen and extremely red. And Dad said, "What happened here?" And I said, "Well, I got a splinter." And he said, "How long's it been in there?" And I said, "It's been in there a few days." And so he said, "Why didn't you tell anybody?" So I didn't want Mom poking around it with a needle. He said, "Guess what's about to happen?" So our trip to the feed store was delayed by a little while. We went back in the house, and I got to hear Mom rant and rave for about a half hour while she was digging a splinter out and mashing all that infection out. If she got aggravated at you, boys, you knew it. And I remember her saying, "You want your leg to rot off?" And I mean, as if I wasn't already traumatized enough, you know. But she meant well. But it's amazing that any time that we encounter things in our flesh that don't belong there, they become painful, right? It's amazing that something that small, now this one was, if we're comparing splinters, this one was a pretty good sized splinter. But still, something that's not that big can inflict so much pain on us because it's not really supposed to be there, right? All right, so that being said, I want to turn your attention 2 Corinthians chapter 12. You guys there? Let's begin reading at verse number 7. The Apostle Paul said, "And lest I should be exalted above measure, through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me thorn in the flesh, messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure." Verse number 8, "For this thing I besought the Lord thrice," or 3 times, "that it might depart from me. And he," referring to the Lord, "said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." Now, I know that's not the end of the verse, but I want to stop right there. And I want to speak for just a few minutes on the subject matter of thorns in the flesh. All right? Now, the Bible doesn't tell us specifically what this thorn was. Now, it has been suggested that perhaps it was Paul's eyesight. There are some references in Scripture that let us know that he suffered from poor eyesight. Okay? But we don't know this for certain. There are others that have offered the suggestion that possibly it could have been another physical ailment, or maybe even persecution or opposition based on 2 Timothy chapter 4, where the Apostle Paul mentions Alexander the coppersmith did him much harm. We don't know for sure. But what we do know is that Paul had a thorn in the flesh and that he pleaded with God. That's what the word besought means. He pleaded with God 3 times. And in God's divine wisdom, he chose not to remove this thorn from out of the Apostle Paul's life. God is God, even when it don't make sense. God is God whenever we don't understand why he does the things he does. He's still God. That song that the McFalls recorded several years ago, I Still Trust You, Lord, those words are so true. The first verse says something like, I've seen the righteous man suffer and hang, and it looked like the wicked would go free. And we look around in our world sometimes, and that's how it seems. That's how it seems. And then the song goes on and says, and in my frustration, it just didn't seem right to me. And there are times whenever we look at things, particularly in our own lives, and we go, God, why are you doing this? I don't understand why this is happening the way that it is. Okay? And I dare say that probably every single one of us, we have a thorn in the flesh. Okay? They come in various shapes and sizes. They come from different places. But nevertheless, they are painful. Now, I know a thorn and a splinter, not exactly the same thing, but both of them still inflict pain. You can get something in your finger. There have been times whenever I've done it at work, and it get to bother me so much, I'm like, I'm not doing anything else until I dig this thing out of here. I usually keep a pocket knife. And sometimes I'll dig it out. And what amazes me is I can get it out of there and it be on the end of the knife blade, and you look at it and go, that thing is tiny. How in the world could that thing bring so much pain? But yet it does. And the same way with thorns in our flesh, okay? Allow me to briefly share with you some potential thorns in our flesh. It could be a physical ailment, just like possibly the Apostle Paul had. It could be any number of things. Chronic headaches. Some people suffer from those. Migraines. Gout. Diabetes. Brother Larry suffers from diabetes. And let me stop right here and say, I don't believe for 1 second that anybody who suffers from any of these things, they haven't thought to ask God to deliver them from that. Right? I know my daughter years ago suffered from migraine headaches. You couldn't even walk in a room and turn the light on. She wanted to be in a dark room. You turn the light on, she turn it off, please. And we prayed and prayed and prayed. We prayed. We prayed. You guys know what I'm talking about. You've been there. And it seemed like our prayers just went up to the ceiling and come back down. But then one day, she suffered from for years. Just one day they were taken from her. Okay? And I'm sure Brother Larry has probably prayed. We've gathered around him up here before and prayed for his diabetes, right? James comes up, right? And here's the thing about it. God is a prayer answering God. There's nothing that he can't do. Nothing. The Bible talks about he's able to do, what is it? Exceedingly abundantly above all that we could ask or even think. If your mind can comprehend it, God can do even more than that. I was sharing with my cousin Jerry a couple of months ago when I went to my other cousin Carrie's funeral. The kid got killed on a motorcycle. I walked in that morning over at the church, and Jerry was one of the few people who was there, and I walked up there and hugged his neck. So what's going on, man? He said, I don't know, man. You tell me. And I said, well, I know God's still in control. And he shook his head and said, yeah. I said, and I know this. If I could understand everything he did, he wouldn't be much of a God. Sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow, but it's true. See, a lot of times we want a God that we would love, or we think we would love, to have a God that we could actually control. Use him for our own purposes. That's not how God works. And it's a good thing that that's not how he works, because if he worked like that, we'd have him running in circles. Let's be real. Because we want something one day, and then maybe a couple of days later, we don't want that anymore. We want something completely different. And so God if he just answered at our beck and call every little thing that we brought to him, we'd have him running in circles. Even though he doesn't get tired, he'd get tired. And so we have all of these potential thorns in the flesh. High blood pressure, low blood pressure, blindness, deafness. I could go on and on. And then there are others that may come in another form. Things that actually cause us pain, sleepless nights. Things like fear and worry and anxiety and depression, lack of confidence, poor self-esteem. These are all things that sometimes people deal with. We all deal with these things, and at some point in our life they become almost too much to bear. These could be potential thorns in our flesh. Or it could even be, because all thorns are not the same, right? It's funny, I was reading about thorns, and I found this out while I was studying. Did you know what a rose has is not actually a thorn? The little things. I didn't know that. See, a thorn is something that grows out. Dad set out a little tree back several years ago. I don't know what he thought it was, but anyway, it turned out to be a locust tree. You guys know what a locust tree is? Dad actually cut it down, but it grew back. And they make good fence posts. That's about the only thing they're good for, isn't it? Yeah. And they have those little thorns that grow out on them, and then they bloom. And what happens is that thorn will actually become a limb. Okay? And according to my research, that's the difference in a thorn, and I think it's called a prickle, which is what a rose has. Those little things it always stays there. They don't ever grow. They just stay there. All right? And thorns come in various forms, okay? And so this could possibly be maybe one of your thorns in the flesh. Resentment. Unforgiveness. Right? Anger. I know, trust me. Lack of patience. Trust me, I understand. That one hits very close to home for me. I'm serious. As I was reading these verses this past week, and I was doing some research, and I was actually praying, and I said, God, am I on the right track here? And because I was praying, I said, Lord, I need you to give me something. And the thing about it is anything that causes you any kind of discomfort or pain, whether it be spiritually, physically, mentally, financially, relationally, whatever it is, it could potentially be a thorn in your flesh. Okay? And so now that we've discovered potential thorns in our flesh, what do we do about them? Now, thorns in our flesh, spiritually speaking, is not something as simple as grabbing a pocket knife and digging a splinter out. Okay? The best thing that we can do is the same thing that the Apostle Paul did, is to cry out to God. That's the best thing that we can do. The book of Psalms is filled with prayers of King David crying out. And we read things like, in my distress I cried unto the Lord, and he heard me. He heard me. Aren't you grateful for that? Yeah. No matter what it is that you're going through, you can cry out to the Lord, and he hears you. Now, he may not answer your prayer the way you want it answered, but he hears you. And not only does he hear you, he cares for you. And he cares about what's best for you. Now, I know I've shared this story here before, but I'm going to reiterate it again. Sometimes we think we know what we want, and if we got what we wanted, it would probably cause us even more harm than we ever imagined. Like I said, I've shared this story. I had an old car. I was 17, senior year of high school, and it was on its last leg, and I spotted a 280Z for sale at a little used cars lot there in Collierville, and I told Mom about it. She said, well, tell your dad. And Dad had already told me. He said, you're going to have to do something. That little old Pontiac ain't going to last much longer. It's kind of one of those deals where you've heard people talk about, pull up to the gas pump and say, what was it, check the gas and fill it up with oil? That's about the way that one was getting. It wasn't going to last very much longer. So I had my eyes set on this red 280Z, and Dad and I went down there, and Dad took that thing. The salesman was about Dad's age, and Dad said, we're looking at that little red 280Z over there. He got the keys. Dad took it out. Mount Pleasant Road, that's, 35, almost 40 years, good grief, 40 years ago now. And yeah, it has been 40 years ago because it's 2026. And he took it out on Mount Pleasant Road right outside of Collierville. It was a little country road back then, and it was a little 5-speed, and no traffic out there. And he took it out there, and he stopped in the middle of the road, and he peeled out, and he was speed shifting, and I was sitting over there in the passenger seat going, yeah, buddy. And he ran it up to over 100 miles an hour. And he looked over at me and said, you can't have this car. I said, why? He said, you'll kill yourself in it. No, this is what I need. No, it's not either. We argued all the way back to the car lot. We got back. Guy said, what do you think about it? That's a nice little car. He can't have it. He'll kill himself in it. Like I said, the guy was about Dad's age. He said, oh, I understand. I got just what you're looking for. And he started walking toward this banana yellow Toyota Tercel, the ugliest car I've ever seen in my life. And he was walking toward it, and Dad was following him, and I was thinking, no, surely not. And they walked straight over, and he raised the hood. Dad was looking at it. It was a 1.8 liter or something like that. Dad said, give me the keys. Dad did the exact same thing. He took it back out on Mount Pleasant Road, stopped dead still in the middle of the road, and took off. I mean, boo. It's a little 5-speed too, right? And Dad said, this is what you need right here. I go, no, that's not what I need. And not what I want either. This is not it. And Dad started pointing out the features on it. It had an air conditioner and it did. The air conditioner blew ice cold. Look, the air conditioner works great. And I don't want it. The radio, somebody had put some custom features. Look, man, the radio works great. Listen, yeah, I don't want it. All the way back to the car lot. He said, you're not getting that red 280Z. You can either drive that little Pontiac till the wheels fall off of it, or you can get this. And reluctantly, I settled for the little ugly banana yellow Toyota Tercel. What was crazy is I didn't drive the thing but about 6 months, and I rear-ended somebody in it. A little putt-putt mobile, and I rear-ended somebody in it. Could you imagine what would have happened if I'd have been in that 280Z? Honestly, it probably would have killed me. Because Dad knew what was best for me. And the same way with God. The Apostle Paul pleaded with God 3 different times to take this thorn in his flesh from him. And for whatever reason, God chose not to. In fact, God's response was, "My grace is sufficient for you." That's a profound statement. My grace is sufficient for you. Sufficient means just what you need. Not too much, but just what you need. Right? You can take your ATM card and go to the bank, and if you don't have money in there, what will it say? Insufficient funds, right? It don't matter if you're only trying to get $20 out of there. If you don't have it in there, it's going to tell you insufficient funds. Right? Sufficient means just enough. Okay? And I think about that line, my grace is sufficient for you. And I'm reminded of what we call the Lord's Prayer. Okay? Which was just a model prayer, right? And Jesus, the disciples came to him and said, "Lord, teach us to pray." And so he started off, "Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And then the very next line, "Give us this day our daily bread." Daily. Grace is something that we need every single day. And I dare say the Apostle Paul, dealing with whatever this was that he was dealing with, he definitely needed new, fresh grace every single day in order to have strength to make it through. So, we can bring things to God in prayer just like the Apostle Paul did. Like I said, God always hears our prayers. He always answers, but sometimes the answer may not be in the affirmative. Okay? Sometimes we can pray, and God will say yes. He will answer the prayer the way we want it answered. Sometimes He may say no. And if He says no, there's a reason why. Or He may even say, wait. Not right now. Be patient. Something some of us don't like to hear, including me. Okay? And then He may answer just like He answered the Apostle Paul. I'm not going to remove it, but my grace is sufficient for you. Now, if we look at verse number 7 of 2 Corinthians chapter 12, the Apostle Paul said, "Unless I should be exalted above measure." Okay? He said he was given a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan. Okay? Almost reminds me of the story of Job. An upright man who walked with God, the Bible said he eschewed evil. In other words, he ran from evil. And yet, even though God did not bring that up on Job, He allowed Satan. He allowed it. Okay? Same way with the Apostle Paul here, because he says a messenger of Satan to buffet me. The word buffet means to harass. Yeah. Now, I don't know where this gospel came from, and I'm about to close here in just a minute. I don't know where this gospel came from that if you turn your life over to Jesus, your life will be on easy street from now on. That is a lie from hell. I don't know who started preaching that, but whoever did ought to be ashamed of themselves. That's not biblical. Not in any shape or form. This is the Apostle Paul we're talking about here. Probably the closest man, there's Jesus who was perfect because he was God. And the Apostle Paul, even though he says that he's the least, obviously with him writing, 2/3 of the New Testament, he's pretty important here. Okay? And if God allowed this to happen to him, then how dare we think sometimes, God, why are you picking on me? Why are you allowing this to happen to me? I'm trying to live for you. And sometimes we act like that. That's like Romans chapter 12 where he talks about presenting your body as a living sacrifice. Dad was all over that Sunday morning. Present your body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Reasonable. Reasonable. Something that God can work with. That's what the word reasonable means. Any of you guys ever shop on Facebook Marketplace? Sometimes you can get some pretty good deals on there. Tricia's always looking for something that's reasonable. Right? That means something that our budget can work with. It means something your wallet can work with. And whenever we offer our bodies to God as a living sacrifice, the only thing we're doing is giving Him something to work with. Some people act like just showing up to church on Sunday, they're doing God a favor. If you present your body as a living sacrifice to God, it's only a reasonable service. You're just giving Him something to work with. So whenever things come our way, in closing tonight, I want you to remember that God has a purpose and a plan. Apparently God's purpose and plan in the Apostle Paul's thorn in the flesh was to keep him from being exalted above measure. I have seen God call people to preach, and they start out humble. And I'm not up here judging. But I have seen them, the longer that they preach, the more arrogant they become. I'm just being real. Yeah. And according to this verse right here, lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations. God had taken the Apostle Paul into a place and had given him some information and some knowledge and some revelation, but in order to keep him from feeling super spiritual, he had to allow something to come in his life to keep him humble. So I want to encourage you in closing tonight. Whatever it is that you're facing, whatever thorn in the flesh that it is, particularly if God just seems to refuse to remove it from you, remember this: He has a purpose and a plan. That thorn may be, just like the Apostle Paul, to keep you humble. Okay? And then the second thing, and I want to close with this, is always remember, never forget, God's grace is sufficient for you. God bless you.